My name is Anthony Maloney, and I did my aerospace project on ICBMs, or also known as Intercontinental Ballistic Missiles. So this is a timeline of the ICBMs. The US's first ever launched ICBM was the SM-65 Atlas, which you can see on the left, and you can see kind of how we progressed to the Minuteman III, which is the only active land-based ICBM that the US uses today. But the whole reason why the ICBM was even created was because of the post World War II era and also the start of the Cold War, and there was threats of Soviet missiles being high. Another factor is the space race that we had with Russia, and so we were wanted to try and create rockets first, and the best way to do it was through ICBMs. Um, you can kind of see the Minuteman 1, the Minuteman 2, and the Minuteman 3. And the reason why they're called Minutemen is because at any moment's notice, it would take 60 seconds for these to launch. And there are people active to this day who just stand on base and are prepared to launch these anytime they need to. So the Minuteman 3 is the only land based ICBM, but the Trident 2, which you can see on the left of it, is submarine based. And those are the only two active ICBMs that we still use to this day. So Werner von Braun is considered the founder of the ICBM, and he was working in Nazi Germany from mid 1994, from mid 1944 to March of 1945, and he created ICBMs to be launched against British and Belgian cities such as London during World War II. In the US, ICBMs have been made by many people, including the Air Force, Boeing, and Lockheed Martin. The Air Force originally invented them, but the Minuteman III is made by Boeing and the Trident II is made by Lockheed Martin, which are both private aerospace corporations. So like I said in the previous slide, Werner von Braun is considered the father of the ICBM, but Sergei Korolev is the lead rocket engineer during the space race between Russia and the US, and he was credited for making the first ICBM in Russia. He's considered the father of modern astrophysics, and he helped launch Sputnik. Um, so here's kind of a chart of how you can see an ICBM works. An ICBM is a multi-phase rocket, and it will go through a series of phases before it actually reaches its target. Usually, the whole process is about a half hour. If it's a very, very long distance, maybe 45 minutes to an hour. But the first phase is known as the boost phase, and this is where the rocket gets into orbit. It has to leave the ground, and usually this takes 2 to 5 minutes, depending on the type of ICBM. There's multiple boosters on this phase usually, so the rocket will kind of separate, as you can see in the diagram, before it actually reaches outer space. And the second phase is when it eventually does reach outer space, and this is where the rocket has its greatest speeds. Usually it's ranging from about 15,000 to 17,000 miles per hour, because there's no gravity in space and no air resistance as well. And then the third and last stage is the final separation stage, where the warheads are exposed, and they are pointed towards their target. It is important to yeah. So here you can see the Trident 2 on the left being launched from a submarine, and the Minuteman 3 on the right being launched. And these are the two that I said previously were the only two active ICBMs that the US uses to this day. So there's not too much media coverage about ICBMs since most of it is classified, but you can see in the bottom right corner the first operational Atlas fired at Vandenberg. Um, the Atlas was the first ICBM that the US created and launched, um, and Vandenberg is where it was launched from. The most recent articles directly talking about ICBMs was in March of this year, and it talks about North Korea's new Hwasong-17 ICBM and North Korea launching it for the first time. We saw this as a small threat because it was larger than most ICBMs were, and that's why it was in the news during the month of March. Most ICBM locations are classified and therefore don't have a lot of information about them because we don't want our enemies to know where they are. but you can see in the map below that this is a map of the 1960s of where the ICBMs were located. So I talked about this previously, but the world event at the time of this was World War II and the Cold War. The space race also helped, but something important to note is the treaty known as START 1, which was a agreement between the United States and Soviet Union to reduce the supply of ICBMs. So the only reason why we have 2 active ICBMs is because we are limited to the amount because of this treaty. The main advancement that made ICBM's existence possible was the development of rockets. The V2 program was a liquid-fueled rocket that allowed the ICBM to travel great distances. The V2 program was started by Werner von Braun in Nazi Germany, and the R-7 rocket, which was also a liquid-fueled rocket, is based out of Russia. And this was also the same rocket that was used for Sputnik, which is an interesting fact. The development of nuclear and hydrogen bombs also made it for these powerhouse countries to want to build these rockets so that they can deliver their missiles and bombs to their enemies while also staying in the comfort of their own country and not having to worry about enemy fire. More modern ICBMs use solid fuel rather than liquid because it burns faster and it gets to the destination quicker. The future of ICBMs is mostly just to upkeep them. Most ICBMs have a 50-year lifespan, and so we, in the next 5 to 10 years, are expected to replace them, which means that we could see some advancements or that they're all just going to be replaced to be the exact same. But something interesting I did find was that they're trying to make ICBMs that stay in the atmosphere, which means that it would take a longer time for radar to detect them and make it so that so that our enemies would be unprepared for ICBMs, would be unable to defend themselves. Thank you for watching our presentation.